To quote the nation's unofficial national anthem, Sweet Caroline by Neil Diamond, "This play is so good, so good, so good." Oh my god, hey, welcome back to my theatre-themed YouTube channel. My name is Mickey Joe and I am obsessed with all things theatre. I am a professional theatre critic here on YouTube, and today we are going to be talking all about the brand new play Dear England, which premiered earlier this year at the National Theatre in London and was so successful there with critics and audiences alike that it transferred almost immediately to the West End, where it is now playing at the Prince Edward Theatre, one of the West End's bigger houses which usually hosts large-scale musical productions. In fact, this is the first play to be staged at the venue in decades. And since it first opened at the National Theatre, it has seen this really rapturous word of mouth. However, you may be watching this video thinking, Mickey Joe, I'm a theatre fan. I'm not too interested in the sports ball because this is a play about football. If you didn't know, soccer to Americans, this is a play about the English football team over a few years under the management of Gareth Southgate, as pictured here, standing on St. George's flag. And if you're anything like me, you grew up very excited about the theatre and not particularly enthusiastic about sports, particularly football. However, let's not assume that all theatre fans can't also enjoy other things. For some people, this may be the perfect crossover of your interests that you've been waiting for years. For other people, you may be so opposed to the idea of seeing a play about football that you just won't be considering this at all. So today, as well as talking about whether or not this is a good production and a good play, featuring good performances, I'm going to address the question, will you enjoy this if you are not a football fan? And for my international viewers, do you have to be British to get it? All that is to come in today's review. Now, if you enjoy this one, make sure to subscribe to my theatre-themed YouTube channel for many more videos coming soon, including many more reviews of West End and Broadway shows. If you're just meeting me today for the first time, you can also find me on other social media platforms. I am at Mickey Joe Theatre on Instagram, X, and TikTok. Now, let's talk about Dear England. Okay, so I'm going to do my best to tell you a little bit about the plot of this show. As previously specified, I do not know too much about football, so I'm just going to have to Google a few things just to bring me up to speed here as well. So football is defined... I'm joking. This play is about the England football team under the management of Gareth Southgate, who is appointed as caretaker manager, sort of only temporary in the position. That being said, he does have some big ideas about how to affect change within the team to address what he believes is an inherent problem. To that end, as well as retooling the lineup slightly and adding some new younger players, he recruits Australian psychologist Dr. Pippa Grange, who specialises in addressing the ethos of sort of a whole structure of people, of a whole group, of a whole team, if you will. Together with the management team, they go about trying to change the attitude of the England players and addressing some of their previous issues, such as the fact that England notoriously are the worst in the world at penalty shootouts and often will lose in big tournaments such as the Euros, such as the World Cup, because of losing penalty shootouts. They surmise that this is inherently linked to the psychology of the players, that they avoid this, that they sort of disconnect from it emotionally, that they don't plan ahead for it because they don't like to think about it, because it's uncomfortable, because it's painful. And for Southgate, this takes on a particular resonance because previously as a player himself, he famously missed a penalty, resulting in England losing a previous tournament back in the 90s, something that evidently still haunts him in his career. The play unfolds over a number of years and over various tournaments, all within the recent memory of the people who are watching it. We see recent Euros championships and World Cup matches that we remember agonizingly. And this being a James Graham play, there is an immense amount of detail unfolding alongside. We sort of see the political backdrop of all of this with an ever-shifting Prime Minister. We glimpse caricatures of previous England managers. We get to know each of the players in the team. This is one of those plays that has a sizable cast and we get to know lots of different individuals. And as I'm describing this plot, you may be thinking that it bears a certain similarity to a recent popular TV show. I am talking about Ted Lasso, because they do have an awful lot in common. You have this new coach coming in to coach this team who have not been successful. The coach is not well liked by the public. They are haunted by some specific thing that happened in their professional past. But by acknowledging the value of talking openly about mental health, talking openly about each other's insecurities and fears, and allowing the players to really become a team on a deeper level, they end up transforming the ethos of the institution and ultimately improving their performance. All of which sounds so suspiciously similar in the two that you might be ready to accuse this play of plagiarism. I don't exactly know the timeline of which was written first. Knowing James Graham, as soon as these penalty shootouts actually happened in these matches, he probably ran to a desk and started writing. But that is to say, the characters and the events depicted within Dear England actually happened. This is all based very much on truth, so plagiarism be damned. Now you may be wondering, how on earth does a play go about depicting something as unruly and challenging as a football match or a penalty shootout? Well, let me tell you what this play actually does to stage those events and whether or not it is successful. So Dear England is written by James Graham, who I'm going to circle back to and talk about as a playwright. It's been directed by Rupert Gold with a set by Ez Devlin. And the way they managed to stage this on the Prince Edward stage, we have screens running along the back, and we have this sort of it's this. Basically, we have what looks like a massive ring light hovering above the stage, and on the interior of it that we can see as the audience, they have different things that are shown on there as well. They show scores, they show countdowns to different sporting events. I spent a little bit trying to work out the significance of the white circle metaphorically. There is a slight resemblance, I guess, to that white circle in the middle of a football pitch. I don't know if that's specifically what they were going for, but that's all I could take from that. Football fans may have a better answer for me here in the comments. The stage also utilizes a donut revolve, which is to say that we have two different concentric circles which can spin independently of each other. We get this brilliant opening visual where we have Gareth Southgate sort of swirling around the outside as he watches a memory of his younger self missing that fateful penalty. If you don't know, I should explain here, and God help you all that I'm explaining football. Penalty shootouts are something that happens if a game goes to full time and a little bit of extra time, that is to say just over 90 minutes, I believe. And then each team has the opportunity to allocate players to take turns just trying to score a goal while the goalkeeper will try and obstruct them. Everyone gets like 4 or 5. Oh, this was covered in the play. I wasn't taking sports notes. I was worrying about the performances. But it's basically a best of 5, and that determines the outcome of the game. If they are tying on goals up to that point. Did I say that already? I have no idea, honestly. This is why I'm not Mickey Joe Sports. Can you imagine? The most interesting thing is how they stage these penalty moments, because we don't really get much of the games to speak of, and we don't see any of the players on the opposing teams. We tend to jump pretty quickly to the penalty shootouts, because that's what this play focuses on, is the inherent drama and theatricality of a penalty shootout. That's what James Graham does really well here, is he mines that moment for its rich theatrical potential. And we have each player in turn who is taking a penalty stood in the centre of the stage beneath this ring light, miming kicking a ball forwards, and then cleverly, through lighting, it indicates to us whether this was successful or not. At the play's most pivotal moment, we also get this incredibly striking visual throwback to that opening piece of imagery. So it is a brilliantly clever staging. I love a revolve at the best of times. I think when you are depicting a play that's going to take place over a number of years and sort of rapidly move through these different time periods, it's a great way of showing time as something that's turning. We're on a planet that spins and turns, and sort of everything progressing at an unstoppable pace, but as well as very clever solutions to a particularly unruly kind of a setting. The real reason for this play's brilliance is its playwright, James Graham. So James Graham, absolutely one of the best working playwrights that we have right now. He is particularly brilliant at taking these historical chapters, whether it's something momentous, whether it's something seemingly very insignificant, and mining them for not only their full theatrical potential and what is going to be hugely funny and dramatic and engaging and compelling, but also highlighting so clearly and so explicitly why they are relevant to a modern audience, whether it's something in recent memory, as this play is, whether it's something from decades before. He loves to comment on the political landscape, on sort of symmetries and similarities between previous eras and the now. His play This House, that centers around this sort of seemingly insignificant political deadlock and says so much about British politics. His recent play Best of Enemies that I saw on the West End, which focused on a handful of live television broadcasts during one particular US election and said so much about the impact that that had on television and on the way that we debate with diametrically opposed political ideologies. And as the title suggests, this one is not just about the England football team. It's not just about that one World Cup or the Euros. This is about how it relates to the nation, the significance of all of this, what it means to us as a country when it looks like England might win, when England loses, the often riotous and dangerous response that this has when England aren't successful, why it is that we care perhaps more deeply and more passionately about winning these tournaments and these championships when we haven't done for a very long time, and the enormous mental and emotional burden that you have to bear as England manager or as any of the players. So it is very interesting, and this is why I think it speaks to people very profoundly, far beyond just football fans. I watched that World Cup match. It was very prevalent at the time, and I was curious, but I definitely don't watch football on the regular, if you couldn't already tell. I still thought this was a gripping and hugely engaging piece of theatre. There was a moment towards the end I almost cried. It was very moving, it was very sincere. For all the same reasons that Ted Lasso is. That's another piece of media that I think is wonderful, even though I have no interest whatsoever in the sport that it's centered around, because just like that, this is not really about the sport. It's about the people, it's about the mindset, it's about the country. This being a James Graham play, of course, there are political nods. We see Theresa May, we see Boris Johnson, we see the adapting political landscape. I think, there could be even more symmetry drawn with the impossible nature of trying to deliver Brexit during the political deadlock we were experiencing at the time and trying to, rehabilitate the England football team. I think we could have had more parallels there rather than just the occasional political wink, but there is a lot for this play to cover. It also does a great job of providing context to anyone who may not be too familiar with the history of all of this. We get a series of great sports history lessons. We get to see these sort of caricatures of previous England football team managers, which are hilarious. Those take place as we see Gareth Southgate beginning to shape who he will be as the manager, what kind of clothes he will wear, the image that he will portray, and how he will be remembered, alongside all of the other managers who have preceded his tenure. Like I said, as well as being just about the team, it's also about the nation, and we see all of these different people. We see Morris dancers speculating about England's upcoming success. We see a butcher. We see various different sort of personalities of the nation, all talking about football, which is exactly what happens when England are playing in any of these major tournaments. They do a great job of portraying the extent to which it really does madly take over the country. That being said, there is some real darkness to the actual events that took place after England lost on penalties in one of the matches depicted, and some of the players were subsequently subjected to enormous racial abuse. There's also a reference to the usual rioting and vandalism and aggression and crime that takes place in the wake of an England loss, but I thought the staging of all of this, I liked the way that it was written. I thought the staging could have brought that in a way that felt even more oppressive, even more sort of volatile. In the later scenes of the play, when we have those players taking those momentous penalties, we have a small crowd representing the people of England watching them closely and pinning all of their hopes on them and sort of stepping forwards in a way that feels increasingly oppressive and claustrophobic. I liked that little bit of staging. I just wanted it to feel bigger. I wanted it to feel more immediate. I wanted to really get this strong and urgent sense of the weight that was on each of these players. I thought we could have been using those screens at the back, which are used throughout the play, to show different scenes from history. We see clips of different football matches, we see different bits of imagery. I thought we could have used those at those moments to literally show everything that's flashing on their minds when they are preparing for these moments. But like I said, a deeply powerful piece of theatre, an engaging piece of theatre, in no small part due to its fantastic performances. So let's talk about some of the actors in this cast. So centrally, you have Joseph Fiennes as Gareth Southgate, and his interpretation of Southgate is very delicate, it's very nuanced. He portrays him as someone with a real softness, with a reluctance to become this figurehead, to make it all about him, with a tremendous amount of care for his players and their mental well-being, who doesn't want to put them in the same position that he found himself in years previously. He's not quite as exuberant or animated as a Ted Lasso type of a character. He is soft-spoken, he is mild-mannered, but for that, he is very charming. He's really quite funny as well, and it's such a thoughtful and conscientious performance. We see all of this weight on him. We see these flashes of realization and everything that he's considering and everything that he is worrying about. We feel this sense of anxiety in a cloud around him. While everyone else is a lot more forthcoming, he has this sort of shroud of mystery about him. He feels almost a little bit Shakespearean as a central character, and you begin to understand what attracted James Graham to writing this play that would focus on his time with the England team. Another of the more prominent performances is given by Dervla Kirwin, who has joined the production in its West End transfer to play the Australian psychologist Dr. Pippa Grange. She is the one who is trying to coax these players into being more open and more communicative, something that they are definitely not receptive to. We first meet her giving this motivational speech about fear, and she is necessarily impactful. She has a lot of status to her performance and her delivery. You completely believe her as both this powerful speaker and this incisive psychologist. She has some brilliant exchanges with Gareth Southgate, and hers are some of the most striking scenes, in part because of her wonderful performance. For the rest, it is very much an ensemble cast. You have people multi-rolling as different characters. For example, Crystal Condé plays both the footballer and later commentator Alex Scott, as well as Prime Minister Theresa May, and she plays three other characters alongside that. Her Alex Scott is more of a genuine portrayal. Her Theresa May is a little bit of a comic caricature, the way that she sort of awkwardly walks around in her leopard print kitten heels. And there are some brilliant standouts within this cast. We have Dara Hand, who plays Marcus Rashford, who gets to deal with everything that, that he has been through as an individual, using his platform to campaign against the political indifference when it comes to free school meals for children, making sure that they are able to eat, children who are living in poverty. Will Close plays Harry Kane. It's another tremendously thoughtful and careful performance that's also hilarious. He is depicted on various occasions as not being particularly verbose or particularly eloquent, but being sort of charmingly enthusiastic all the same. A light-hearted and comic characterization that I will say does nothing to prepare us for the hugely emotional performance he ends up giving by the end of the play. Finally, some brilliant supporting performances come from Paul Thornley, who is quite aggressively indifferent to Southgate's new managerial style, and Lloyd Hutchinson, who gives us so many comedic moments. He's another one who is quite gentle, quite mild-mannered, and becomes outraged to find out that some of the younger players don't know as much football history as they ought to hugely comic effect. He's very funny. Now, as promised, I think one of the key questions about this for theatregoers is, am I going to be interested in this play if I'm not a football fan? And I think we've already addressed that to a certain extent. It talks about so much more than just football. It talks about men's mental health. It talks about sort of a figure in any kind of a momentous position, whether that's a sporting one, whether that's a political one, and the weight of obligation and responsibility when you know that the eyes of the nation are fixed on you. It talks about what it does to people to be put in those positions of responsibility. And genius James Graham brings in so many other details as well. I love that we see all of the Marcus Rashford stuff. I love that we find enough time to nod to that. I love that we talk about the World Cup in Qatar and the decisions made about whether or not England team captain Harry Kane would wear a rainbow armband in solidarity against that country's anti-LGBT policies. I love that we show the comparative success of the England women's team. I love that Alex Scott is a character who features in this. There's just a tremendous richness to anything that James Graham depicts. It's always going to be a very full and vivid picture of that time. And so, as well as from a sporting perspective, you also get this brilliant story from a recent historical perspective as well. I think the bigger question is not, will I enjoy this if I'm not a football fan, to which I say categorically, yes you will. It's whether you can enjoy this as someone who is not British. If you're an American tourist coming over here, are you going to get as much out of Dear England? Because Ted Lasso is a show that fuses together two different sensibilities. We have American characters interacting with English characters, and we have sort of that cultural clash between them. This is something that is quite inherently British, obviously. And it does definitely benefit from the enormous dramatic irony that is an audience who largely already know how this is all going to end. We know who missed those penalties. We know the results of those matches, which at the beginning of the play are years in the future and they are looking towards. That's all in our past. We know what happens. But that's not to say it's going to be inaccessible to a non-British audience member. I think it does a fantastic job of delivering all of the necessary context. You can follow it, absolutely. Maybe it will be even more special for being a little bit more of a surprise if you don't know what's going to happen in those games, other than the ones that I may have already spoiled in this review. But it's like watching anything that depicts a real chapter in history from a place where you do not live. It may not be quite as relevant to you, it may not be quite as pertinent to you, but if you enjoy seeing stories about other places, then there's no reason that you wouldn't be able to enjoy this. To that end, I am so curious to hear what other people thought of Dear England at the Prince Edward Theatre. That has been my full review. If you have seen this play, if you saw it at the National Theatre, comment down below with what you thought about it, especially if you are a football fan, if you are not a football fan, if you are British, if you are not British. Let me know your perspective on what this play was like for you, and make sure to tell us who your favourite cast member was in this fantastic ensemble cast. Thank you so much for watching today's video. I hope that you have enjoyed. If you did, make sure to subscribe to my theatre-themed YouTube channel for many more reviews coming soon about all of your favourite West End and Broadway shows. I hope that everyone is staying safe and that you have a stagey day.
For 10 more seconds, I'm Mickey Joe Theatre. Oh my god, hey, thanks for watching, have a stagey day. Subscribe!